That was a scary introduction, wasn't it? Between the creepy music, the scary guys, the guys with the scary face painted on them. This is quite a chilling game, isn't it? It is not often that a game like this comes along and scares the bejesus out of me. What is this game? It is Manhunt. According to Louise H.C. on an article called Manhunt 20 Years Later, How Does Rockstar's Disturbing Video Game Hold Up?, he discusses various things about the title, and here are some points of his that I'd like to bring up. Despite often being regarded as a small-scale successor to the 3D GTA titles, Manhunt was actually developed concurrently with those larger games. In fact, it was something of a pet project by Rockstar North, with the team wanting to craft a never-before-seen urban horror experience that wouldn't rely on supernatural monsters or aliens to disturb players. While the Running Man meets 8mm premise was a title led to backlash within the studio itself, with several developers complaining that the project was heading deep into adults-only territory. The game would ultimately release without a hitch the very same year that it was first announced. You play as James Earl Cash, who has been spared from execution by a sadistic snuff film director, Lionel Starkweather. As James Earl Cash, you are spared from execution and given a massive sedative, and when you wake up from your sedative, you wake up in a dark, secluded room with a voice coming on over the speakers that's just begging you to put on this strange little earpiece, and once you put it on, he is the man that is the voice in your head throughout the rest of the game. Once the gameplay starts, you walk outside and you meet this mysterious gang called the Hoods. They're just a group of violent people that just want nothing more than to beat you down for the entertainment of Mr. Lionel Starkweather. But as the game progresses and gets harder and harder, you face more and more twisted individuals that find you easier and chase you around with guns throughout the city. According to Nightmare Fuel on TV Tropes, even though the usual supernatural threats are gone, both Manhunt 1 and 2 games put the horror into survival horror. These games are probably scarier because the horror isn't supernatural. We may not believe in monsters, but we can easily believe in real-life paranoia fuel. We're all scared of being stalked by nut jobs in the shadows who are perfectly willing and capable to brutally butcher us for survival, money, racial hatred, perverted sex desires, raving insanity, or simply because they just love to kill. Even the instruction manual is pretty scary. It's presented as though it's an in-universe catalog that sells snuff films and other illegal items, and while it's chock full of black comedy, the last page in particular is very disturbing in how it starts issuing some thinly veiled threats to you. A direct quote from the game manual: "It's possible that you found this catalog in an alley, stumbled across it in a friend's apartment, or maybe uncovered at the scene of a crime. Put it down, then forget you ever saw it. And remember this phrase, I didn't see anything." If you're still reading this, then I hope you're supposed to be. Whoever gave this to you has to vouch for you, and they know what a risk that it is, even if you don't. Our clientele have been hand-selected for their appreciation of the art, but if for some reason you lose the taste for our films, then we'll give you a full first-hand experience. The promotional website for the game, now defunct and turned into a fan webpage, with its cheap and grimy aesthetic, was meant to look like it actually came from the dark web. Keep in mind that this game came out in 2003, a long time before the ugliest side of the internet entered into public imagination. Now, back at the start of the video, I mentioned that this game gave me nightmares. Can any of you guess as to why this game gave me nightmares? I'll give you a few seconds. Time's up. Okay, so what gave me nightmares about this game? Place yourself in James Earl Cash's shoes. You are a man that has just woken up from being spared from an execution, and you have people that are just wanting to hunt you down and kill you and cut you up.
And they're here to hunt you down and cut you up.
You have to run, hide, stalk your enemies in the shadows, and also try to avoid creatures like this. As a 20-something-year-old kid playing this game, I will admit that I was, drinking during this game, so it just made the scary and fear atmosphere that much more greater. Growing up playing this game, my cousin and I took turns playing it, but eventually it ended up with me playing it, and it was just scary as hell just trying to survive this game, as every noise you make is detected, and you have to stalk and skulk around in the shadows to make sure you are not seen. And as you hunt down and attack your victims, you either have to leave them out as bait, or you have to hide them to make sure that they don't find you. After many hours of playing this game, you want to know how many hours roughly it took me to complete this game? About 20. Because I played at a snail's pace because I did not want to take the chance of being hit, attacked, or detected. And you want to know the biggest scene in this game that gave me nightmare fuel? Here, I'll introduce you to this guy, Pigsy. A chainsaw-wielding guy who is not quite all there. Now, after beating this guy and completing the game, you are given access to replay the levels, and you have to do better and earn better rankings so that you can get access to cheat codes, which I took full advantage of these cheat codes, as these cheat codes were things like silence, so your footsteps were silenced, fully tooled up, so you started the level with a load of weapons instead of nothing. And there were also other cheat codes like regeneration, which regenerated your health, and there were funny cheat codes such as helium hunters, where the people that were hunting you down and trying to kill you talk with a helium voice. There were also costume codes, which I didn't care much for, as the only costume codes there were was for a white rabbit that you hunt down in a later level, and a costume where you played as Pigsy, which, unless you can play with this chainsaw the whole game, I was all set on that one. Now, with these cheat codes in hand, this game was my revenge pinata, as I would replay the levels and I would just run through and mow down every enemy in my path. That's kind of a, haha, I beat the game and now I'm going to enjoy it to the max. Nowadays, we're in a survival horror renaissance. We have remakes of Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space out. GTA 5 is getting its 500th console port. We have a Silent Hill 2 remake that is coming down the pipeline. And if you look on Steam, there are some pretty good, delectable, and tasty choices to sink your teeth into if you're a survival horror fan. Now, why am I making this video? I have one plea for Rockstar Games, and that is remake Manhunt. Now, Manhunt 2, that one can sit on the wayside. That stirred up more trouble than the first game. This game is a more serious approach to storytelling, and atmosphere likely played a part in the controversy surrounding the game's release, with the title even being banned in a handful of countries due to its explicit nature and a supposed glorification of cruelty. In fact, it was only this year that New Zealand finally decided to release the game after a thorough re-examination, though it still remains unavailable in places like Germany and Australia. However, looking back on Manhunt after decades of virtual blood and guts, especially of the high-definition variety, most players will likely come to the conclusion that the original game isn't as violent and mean-spirited as its reputation makes it out to be. The lack of visual fidelity and some clever camera angles and editing usually mask the game's crueler executions, and it's never implied that Cash actually enjoys all this killing. As the protagonist is simply playing along in order to guarantee his freedom. According to Julie Munsey, in an article written in 2016 called Manhunt Remains, a Powerful Reflection of Violence on Film from a Wired website, the gameplay then is focused on stalking and silently murdering droves of fellow convicts in brutal fashion. Upon release, a lot of popular voices, mainstream news sites, California U.S. Representative Joe Baca, decreed the game was encouraging violence. And it does, in its way. Violence is the point of the game, but killing in Manhunt is far from glamorous. That's what remains so effective about it. It's not a fun killing game, it's a horror game. The killing here is enthralling but nasty, as horrific as 2003's graphics and sound processing technology could communicate. You're encouraged to silently execute enemies, but at the moment of execution, the game pulls away control. The camera shifts to a simulated viewpoint of a fuzzy handheld recorder, and you watch Cash commit the deed. Every other part of the game, from its basic but finely tuned stealth system to its slightly cartoony series of prison gangs set up to slaughter, revolves around this single awful moment. Please, Rockstar Games, remake Manhunt. Now, you can either dial up or dial down some of the violent, gruesome, and gore effects that happen in this game. I remember reading articles about how making this game, it kind of gave some of the developers and people making the game some nightmares. I got nightmares too just from playing it, so I can only imagine what your development team went through making this game. With all the horror games that are coming out this year, Manhunt deserves a second chance. And with the new console and hardware, may I make a suggestion? If you remake Manhunt, you can also kind of give James Earl Cash a backstory, as how he wound up in prison is a mystery to everybody. There's plenty of fan theories that kind of point in the direction that, he used to work for the mob, and that's how he got caught and imprisoned. And not to mention the fact that there's all kinds of Grand Theft Auto Easter eggs that are in Manhunt that kind of connect the two worlds together. In an article from Screen Rant that discusses how the Manhunt universe and the GTA series are connected, I wanted to use a quote here that discusses how this is the first game based in Carcer City. It is explicitly stated to be close to Liberty City, and many cars from the GTA series can be found on Carcer City streets in the Manhunt games. Michael, from the Grand Theft Auto series, also refers to the city in GTA 5 when he says it was the location of his first robbery, making it a connection that is reciprocated in both franchises. I mean, even if you can find a way to find a happy balance between the violence and telling a creepy story in Manhunt, who knows, maybe you can even take the money from a successful Manhunt reboot and pay for the therapy of the development team. For the most part, I think we need a Manhunt remake that kind of dives further into James Earl Cash's backstory. Like I said earlier, you can either dial up or dial down the violence in the game. Even some of the gruesome cutscenes that happen as you kill people in the game. It's like, yes, the sound design, I will give kudos to. The sound design is brutal, and that's kind of some of where my nightmare feel came from. The sound design is remarkably detailed and suitably nasty during the violent execution for the machete and cleaver kills. Enemies make some particularly horrific noises as they are decapitated. The soundtrack is pure horror. It is not your usual spooky piano or scare chord. It drones. They are usually going to leave the feeling of something or someone is going to attack you at any moment. The track for Deliverance is absolutely panic fuel. According to the Manhunt video game Wikipedia page, the game received positive reviews from critics and won several accolades, with particular praise directed at its dark, gritty tone and violent gameplay. However, this game was also implicated in the murder of a kid in the UK, although this accusation was later rejected by the police and the courts. While not a commercial hit, Manhunt did develop a substantial cult following. A former Rockstar employee admitted that the game almost caused a mutiny in the company, saying that the team had already weathered plenty of controversy over GTA 3 and Vice City. We're no strangers to it, but Manhunt felt different. And then a note on the legacy of the game, Manhunt had garnered a cult following among fans and has cited in a Vice article in March of 2016 as one of Rockstar's very best games. Likewise, Game Informer considered the game a dark, underappreciated masterpiece. It was recognized as an example of the best gaming horror by VentureBeast in October 2011. Not to discuss the legacy of the game, Manhunt has garnered a cult following among fans and is cited in a Vice article in March of 2016 as one of Rockstar's very best games. Likewise, Game Informer considered the game a dark, underappreciated masterpiece. It was recognized as an example of the very best in horror gaming by VentureBeast in October of 2011. It is also included in the 1001 video games you must play before you die in 2010, and is listed at number 85 in IGN's top 100 PlayStation 2 games that same year. You know, the violence, do with it as you please. Considering what we see in the Grand Theft Auto games, Resident Evil, just all of the horror stuff that's come out recently. I mean, have you seen the peel system that's in Dead Space? Mwah! Chef's kiss. So, Rockstar Games, remake Manhunt and give it a modern update. I will take us out with Lionel Starkweather giving us his famous line from the opening of the game.
It's up to you. Okay.